The vote should have been simple. For most wars in the galaxy, the Council preferred to end things from orbit, fast, clean, distant. A few bright strikes from the sky, and the problem disappeared before it could grow worse. But this time was different. The target was a prison world called Varax 9, a place ruled by one cruel species, but filled with captives, workers, and civilians from many worlds. An orbital attack would kill the guilty, yes, but also thousands who had done nothing wrong. So for the first time in many years, the Galactic Council approved a full ground assault. That decision led to another question. Who would be sent down to fight? Inside the Council flagship, the debate had already turned cold. President Zaire Tall stood near the long glass wall of the chamber, watching distant stars burn like silent fires. Behind him, metal-bodied avatars sat around the circular table. The real delegates were far away on their home planets, speaking through those machines. Safer that way, easier too. No one liked being close to battle unless they had no choice. Zaire Tall turned and spoke in a calm, hard voice. I recommend that human volunteers be excluded from the ground force. The room stayed silent. He took that silence as permission to continue. The enemy on Varax 9 uses fear tactics, psychic pressure, and close-range brutality. We need species trained for that environment. The Sileth can break hostile minds. The Kree can scout through living swarms. Both are built for ground war. Then his eyes narrowed. But humans, they have no psychic talent, no natural armor, no venom, no claws, no biological advantage worth naming. They are physically ordinary and strategically unproven. Their enthusiasm is not a weapon. Their courage is not enough. A few avatars moved slightly, showing interest. One of them, a silver-faced representative named Lorum, leaned forward. I agree with much of that, Lorum said, but I do not think we should refuse them. Zaire Tall frowned. Why not? Because humans have been asking for a chance to fight beside us for years, Lorum replied. If we deny them again, they will grow resentful. But if we allow them to join, he paused, then gave a thin smile. Reality will teach them what we do not need to say. Another delegate let out a quiet sound of agreement. They believe they are being underestimated, Lorum continued. Then let them see the truth for themselves. Let them stand beside real war species and understand the gap. One by one, more voices joined in. Let them go. They will learn. They may be useful as extra numbers. The important work will still be done by others. Zaire Tall listened, expressionless. He knew what they really meant. This was not trust. This was not respect. This was a lesson disguised as permission. When the vote finally came, the result was clear. Humans would be allowed into the ground assault, not because the Council believed in them, but because the Council expected them to fail. 2 days later, on the dropship heading toward Varax 9, Captain Huron of the Sileth studied his assigned squad and felt something close to insult. 1 Kree scout, 1 Sileth mind war specialist, and 3 humans. He stared at them in disbelief. 3. Of all the bad luck in the stars, why had they been given 3? Huron thought the humans would slow the mission down. He had no idea that before the first shots were over, they would change the entire battle.
Captain Huron had worked with many species before. He had fought beside the Kree, who moved like shadows and killed before fear even had time to rise. He had seen the armored Dravok walk through fire like it was warm rain. He had once served with a pair of Geth assassins who never spoke for 6 straight days and still completed every mission. But humans? Humans were always the same. Too expressive, too loud, too curious.
always looking around, always touching things, always asking questions at the worst possible moment. They carried emotion on their faces like a glowing signal. No discipline in the eyes, no battle calm in the body. Nothing about them suggested true survival under pressure. And yet, the three assigned to his unit did not look afraid. That part bothered him most. The dropship shook as it entered the ash-thick skies of Varix 9. Warning lights flashed red along the walls. Engines screamed. The hull groaned under the pressure of descent. Outside, fire rolled past the narrow viewports. Still, the humans sat ready. The first was a broad-shouldered man with dark skin and a broken scar near his jaw. His name tag read Sergeant Malik Torres. He was checking his rifle with relaxed hands, almost like he had done this 1,000 times before. Next to him sat Corporal Lena Voss, smaller, sharp-eyed, and so still that it felt strange. She watched the cabin door the way a hunter watched tall grass. The third, Eli Mercer, looked the youngest. He had a nervous mouth and restless fingers, but even he was not panicking. He kept tightening and retightening his gloves, then glancing at the others as if drawing strength from them. Hiran finally spoke. "You understand this is not a training run." Torres looked up. "I sure hope not." A few Kree soldiers nearby gave annoyed clicks. Hiran's expression hardened. "This world is not forgiving. The enemy here breaks minds before bodies. If you freeze, you die. If you hesitate, you make others die too." Lena answered this time. "Then we won't freeze." So simple, so certain. Hiran almost laughed. The ship slammed hard enough to throw everyone sideways. The landing ramp alarm began to pulse. A mechanical voice filled the bay. "Touchdown in 10 seconds. Hostile range likely. Prepare for immediate combat." Around them, troops locked helmets into place, weapons powered on with sharp metallic sounds. The air changed. It became tighter, colder, the last quiet moment before violence. Hiran rose and looked at the squad. "The objective is a labor complex north of the landing zone. Intelligence reports mixed hostiles and prisoners. We move in, secure the control center, and disable anti-air defenses for the second wave. Stay close, stay useful. Do not improvise." Torres stood up. "Got it. Stay useful." Eli swallowed hard, then nodded. Lena only checked her magazine and said, "Door opens, we move." The ramp dropped. Smoke poured in first, then heat, then sound. Gunfire cracked across the blackened plain before the squad had taken 3 steps. Something exploded to the left. Dirt and burning metal rained over them. Screams rose in 2 different languages. One Kree soldier fell instantly, chest torn open by a burst from the ridge ahead. "Down!" Hiran shouted. Everyone hit the ground. Everyone except Torres. For one terrible second, the human stayed standing in the open. Hiran turned in fury and saw Torres firing straight into the smoke, not wildly, but with shocking control. 3 shots, 3 enemy shapes dropped. Then Torres hit the ground at last, calm as ever, and shouted over the chaos. "Captain, they're using the smoke to hide a flank." Hiran's blood ran cold, because the human was right. The battle had only begun, and already one impossible fact was clear. The humans were not reacting to the fight. Somehow, they were reading it. Hiran did not waste time asking how the human had seen it. He rolled toward a slab of broken stone and fired a sharp pulse into the smoke line. At once, dark figures shifted on the ridge. Not one flank unit, 4, maybe 5. They had been crawling low through the ash, using the chaos to sly around the squad's right side. "Shift right," Hiran ordered. "Cut them off." The Kree scout was already moving, vanishing into the gray haze like a thrown knife. Lena Voss went after him without waiting for permission, fast and low, her rifle tight against her shoulder. Hiran almost shouted for her to stay in formation, but the moment passed. There was no room left for pride. Another blast hit nearby. Eli flinched, then pressed himself against a shattered cargo barrier, breathing hard. Hiran saw the fear on the young human's face at last. Good, he thought bitterly. At least one of them understands. Then Eli looked up and yelled, "Captain, left tower, window, third level." Hiran turned and fired on instinct. A sniper burst shattered the stone where his head had been a second earlier. His return shot burned through the window frame. A body fell out of the tower and disappeared into the smoke below. Hiran stared for half a beat. The human had saved him too. No more time. The ridgeline erupted again. Enemy troops were pouring through the smoke, thin and fast, wearing bone-colored armor marked with the crest of Varix 9's ruling caste. Some carried pulse carbines. Others rushed forward with hooked blades that hummed with electric charge. Madness tactics, fear tactics, close-range terror. Exactly what the Council had warned about. "Hold the line," Hiran shouted. Torres did more than hold it. The human rose to one knee behind cover and fired with frightening steadiness, each shot controlled, each movement efficient. He was not spraying, he was solving. One target, then the next, then the next. When a Blade Runner leaped over a chunk of wreckage and charged straight at them, Torres dropped his rifle, drew a sidearm, and put 2 rounds through its throat before the creature landed. Lena's voice came through the squad link, short and sharp. "Right flank collapsing. Kree is wounded. I'm pinning 2 hostiles near the trench." "You moved too far," Hiran snapped. "I know, but it worked." That answer should not have calmed him. It did. Eli crawled toward a fallen supply case, hands shaking but eyes fixed. He popped it open, found a portable signal spike, and looked at Hiran. "This can boost local comms, right?" "Yes." "Then cover me." Before Hiran could stop him, Eli sprinted through open fire toward the center rubble pile. Shots cracked around him. Dust jumped at his boots. The boy nearly fell once, caught himself, kept going, and jammed the spike into a broken support beam. A blue burst flashed through the battlefield. The dead static in their comms vanished. At once, voices poured in from nearby units. "South team alive! Need med support! We have civilians in the lower pits. Anti-air cannon still active." Their blindness was gone. Eli dove back behind cover, chest heaving. "Comms are up." Hiran looked at the 3 humans, one anchoring the line, one tearing apart a flank, one restoring command under fire, and felt an unfamiliar thought rise in him. This was not recklessness. This was not luck. This was training shaped into something hotter, something stubborn, something dangerous. Then a new voice came over the restored channel, urgent and strained. "Be advised, enemy heavy unit inbound from the prison gate. Repeat, heavy unit inbound." And from the smoke ahead, something huge began to move. The first wave had been hard enough, but what came out of the smoke next was built to crush squads like theirs in seconds.
The heavy unit stepped out of the smoke like a nightmare given metal skin. It was at least 3 times the height of a human, wrapped in layered black armor with glowing seams running across its chest and limbs. Its head was small compared to the rest of it, almost hidden inside a thick neck shield, and one of its arms had been replaced with a rotating cannon that hummed with rising power. The other ended in a crushing claw stained with old damage and fresh blood. Each step shook the ground. Around it, the enemy infantry pushed forward again, using the giant machine as a moving wall. Hiran's mind raced. A front assault would fail. A retreat would expose the civilians behind them. And if that cannon opened up at full power, this entire line would be erased before they could even think. "Spread out," Hiran ordered. "Do not bunch together." The heavy unit fired. A blast of white-blue energy tore across the battlefield, turning stone into dust and metal into glowing fragments. One Kree soldier vanished in the flash. Another was thrown so hard into a wrecked transport that his armor split open. Even Torres ducked lower. "Okay," he muttered. "That's a problem." "That is not useful commentary," Hiran snapped. Torres checked the machine again, eyes narrow and focused. "No, but this is. It tracks slow before firing, and the left leg drags half a second behind the right. Hiran looked again. The human was correct. The machine was damaged, not badly, but enough. Lena's voice came through the comm. I'm closer to its side. Armor joints are thick. Back panel is thinner. Too far to reach safely, Hiran replied. Didn't say it was safe. Of course she didn't. The heavy unit turned, cannon charging again. Eli saw it and shouted, Captain, it's lining up on the trench. There are prisoners down there. Hiran felt a cold wave pass through him. If that blast hit the trench, the civilians would die instantly. He rose from cover, already calculating impossible angles, when Torres grabbed his arm. I've got an idea, the human said. Then say it fast. Torres pointed toward the broken fuel pipes running along the remains of the labor yard wall. That thing's tracking by movement and threat. We keep its eyes on us, force it left, and drive it over those lines. Hiran understood at once. Fuel ignition. Big one, Torres said. Then Lena hits the back panel while it's busy. Lena answered immediately over comms, already moving. Hiran should have rejected the plan. It depended on timing, nerve, and an amount of luck he did not trust. But the cannon was still charging. There was no better option. Do it, Hiran said. Torres stood and opened fire first, not to kill, but to provoke. Shot after shot rang against the heavy armor, bright sparks jumping off the chest and shoulder plates. The machine reacted at once, turning toward him. Hey, ugly, Torres shouted. Come on! Eli, somehow understanding without another word, popped from cover and fired from a different angle, drawing the machine farther left. It swung between them, tracking, correcting, trying to choose. Then Hiran joined in. Pulse fire struck the machine's head shield. The giant roared, an awful grinding sound of rage and machinery, and charged exactly where they needed it to go, straight toward the damaged fuel lines. Now, Hiran shouted. Torres dove clear. Hiran fired at the pipe junction. Nothing. For one terrible second, nothing happened at all. Then the entire wall exploded. Fire rolled upward in a violent orange sheet. The blast hit the heavy unit from below, lifting one side of its frame and knocking it sideways. Armor plates split. The machine crashed to one knee. And from somewhere beyond the flames, Lena Voss opened fire on the exposed back panel. The explosion had not killed the monster, but Lena had found its weak point, and in the next few seconds, either the machine would die or one of them would. Lena fired in controlled bursts, not wasting a single shot. The exposed panel on the machine's back sparked under the impact, then sealed halfway as emergency plates tried to close over it again. Smart design, fast repair response, built to survive damage in the middle of battle, but not fast enough. Panel is closing, Lena called out. I need 3 more seconds. You have 2, Hiran replied, watching the machine struggle upright through the fire. Its cannon arm was damaged now, the barrel twitching and throwing off unstable light. One leg burned at the joints. Smoke poured from the shattered plating across its spine. Still, it did not fall. It turned with terrible force, claw arms slamming into the ground as it tried to bring itself around toward Lena's position. Move! Hiran shouted. Too late. The machine swung the broken cannon like a club. The blast shield on its side smashed through a column near Lena's cover. Stone and metal exploded outward. Her comm cut off with a burst of static. For one sharp second, everything inside Hiran went cold. Then Torres was already moving. I'm going to her. That is not an order, Hiran snapped. Torres ignored him. Of course he did. The human ran straight through the ash and flying debris, low and fast, weaving between crater edges and torn metal braces. Enemy infantry saw him and opened fire. He dropped one with a running burst, slid behind broken machinery, then pushed forward again without slowing. Eli stared after him, fear plain on his face. He's going to get killed. Then stop watching and help me kill that machine, Hiran said. The words came harder than he expected.
Eli swallowed and nodded. His hands were shaking again, but now Hiran saw something else inside the fear. Not weakness, refusal. The boy was scared, yes, but he was still here. The machine rose another half step. Hiran aimed for the broken spine panel and fired. His pulse round struck deep, but not deep enough. The armor beneath the outer shell was thicker than expected. Eli looked around wildly, eyes searching the wreckage. Then he saw it. "Captain," Eli said, "the supply sled, power cells." Hiran followed his gaze. Half buried in rubble near the trench was a transport sled, wrecked but intact enough to show its emergency battery cluster. Overload potential. High risk. Very high. "Can you reach it?" Hiran asked. Eli gave a weak, breathless laugh. "I guess we're about to find out." He bolted from cover before Hiran could answer. The machine saw him and turned at once, choosing the moving target. Hiran fired repeatedly into its damaged side, forcing it to hesitate. That tiny delay was enough. Eli reached the sled, tore open the side compartment, and yanked free a heavy power cell with both hands. It was too large for him to throw far. Hiran saw that immediately. So did Eli. Instead of throwing it, the human ran straight at the machine. "Mercer!" Hiran roared. Eli did not stop. The machine raised its claw arm to crush him. At the last instant, Eli slid beneath the swing, slammed the power cell into the shattered opening in its back plating, and jammed it deep with both arms. Then he stumbled away, falling hard into the ash. "Now!" Eli screamed. Hiran fired. The shot hit the cell. For half a heartbeat, the battlefield went white. The explosion ripped through the machine from the inside out. Armor burst apart in blazing pieces. The chest split. The cannon arm launched into the air like broken bone. The giant let out a sound like tearing metal and collapsing engines, then crashed backward in flames. Silence followed. Not full silence. War never gave that. But a stunned silence, the kind that lasted just long enough for every living soldier nearby to understand the impossible had happened. Then Torres came over comms, rough and breathless. "Captain," Hiran said, "I found Lena. She's alive." Hiran closed his eyes for one brief moment. One human had broken the heavy. One human had gone back into fire for a teammate, and the third had survived both. The council had sent them down here to learn a painful lesson. Hiran was starting to think the lesson belonged to everyone else. The machine was dead, but the battle was not, because beyond the prison gate, alarms were rising, and something inside Varix 9 had finally noticed the humans. The death of the heavy unit should have broken the enemy line. Instead, it changed the shape of the battle. Alarms began to scream from inside the prison complex, long and sharp, echoing across the labor yard like a warning call from some giant beast. Red lights flashed along the outer walls. Steel doors slammed shut. Defensive turrets rose from hidden ports in the ground. The enemy was no longer treating the assault like a border attack. Now they knew they were being threatened from within. And somehow, Hiran could feel the shift. Not because of the machines, not because of the guns, because the humans had done something the enemy had not expected. They had hit hard, adapted faster, and survived long enough to become dangerous. Torres returned carrying Lena over one shoulder through the drifting smoke, though carrying was not fully right. She was half walking, half leaning, one arm wrapped across his back, face pale beneath streaks of dirt and ash. "I can walk," she muttered. "You can complain," Torres said. "That's not the same thing." Hiran stepped toward them at once. "Report." "Bruised ribs, maybe cracked. Helmet took the worst of it. Left shoulder's bad, still usable." Torres lowered her beside the cover line. "She tried to shoot the wreckage on the way back." "I was checking for movement," Lena snapped. Hiran would once have called this disorder. Now he only nodded once and turned toward Eli, who was still sitting where the explosion had thrown him. The young human had both hands on the ground and was breathing like every lungful hurt. "Mercer, status." Eli looked up. His face was gray with shock. "I'm okay." Huron's eyes narrowed. That was not convincing. Eli gave a thin smile. "Then mostly okay." Before Huron could press further, the restored command channel burst alive again. "All units, update! Outer yard resistance increasing. Anti-air defenses still active. Civilian holding sectors detected beneath the central block. Repeat, civilian holding sectors detected." Another voice cut in, strained and angry. "Enemy reinforcements moving from the interior corridors. We need that control center now." Huron looked toward the prison gate. Massive, reinforced, half open. Beyond it, the central block rose like a fortress inside a fortress, built from dark alloy stone and lined with narrow towers. Somewhere in there sat the anti-air controls. Somewhere below it were the prisoners. And between here and there lay a kill zone. The Kree scout finally returned from the right flank, limping and bleeding from one leg. "Interior route exists," he said. "Maintenance trench, narrow, defended light, leads beneath the east wall." Huron's mind locked onto the idea at once. A direct push across the yard would cost too many lives. The trench route was ugly, cramped, and probably trapped, which meant it was possible. He crouched and drew a rough map in the ash between them. "We split into two tasks," Huron said. "Main Allied line keeps pressure on the gate to hold enemy focus. Our squad enters through the maintenance trench, breaches into the lower levels, locates civilians, then pushes upward to the control center." Lena studied the sketch. Small team, tight route, close fighting. Yes. Torres looked toward the fortress. "So the fun part?" "No," Huron said flatly. "The suicidal part." Torres smiled anyway. Huron ignored it and continued. "Once inside, speed matters more than volume. We avoid full engagements where possible. We reach the controls, disable anti-air, and open access for the second wave. If civilians can be extracted, we extract them. If not, we secure their sectors and transmit their location." Eli stared at the prison gate, then asked quietly, "How many prisoners do you think are in there?" Huron did not answer first. Too many, he thought. Far too many. Then he said, "Enough that orbital fire was rejected." That was answer enough. A fresh explosion shook the yard. Allied troops were still fighting at the front line, buying minutes with blood. Huron rose. "We move now." Lena pushed herself upright despite the pain. Torres checked her straps without being asked. Eli stood more slowly, jaw tight, but he stood. The Kree scout reloaded, and for the first time in his command life, Huron looked at a team made partly of humans and felt something stronger than doubt. He felt trust trying to form. Then the prison gate opened wider with a grinding roar, and a voice thundered out from hidden speakers in a cold, mocking tone. "Let them enter. The inside will finish what the battlefield could not." The enemy was inviting them in, which meant one thing for certain. Whatever waited under Varex 9 was worse than the war outside.
The maintenance trench was barely wide enough for two soldiers side by side. Rust-dark walls pressed in close on both sides, wet with leaking pipes and old chemical stains. The air smelled like burned metal, oil, and something older beneath it all, something sour and human or close enough to it. Every few steps, steam hissed from cracked vents and rolled across the floor in pale clouds. The sound made the trench feel alive. Hiron led from the front. The Kree scout moved ahead when the path widened, then fell back when it narrowed again. Torres stayed near Lena, careful without making it obvious. Eli carried the portable comm spike on his back now, along with extra power packs taken from the yard. No one spoke unless needed. Even so, the silence did not feel empty. It felt loaded. Above them, faint vibrations rolled through the ceiling. The larger battle was still raging in the labor yard. Allied troops were holding the enemy at the gate, forcing attention outward. Every second that fight continued, this smaller mission had a chance. Then Lena raised one fist. Everyone stopped. Ahead, the trench bent left. And from around that bend came voices, not one language, two, maybe three. One was clearly enemy command speech, cold, clipped, mechanical. Another sounded like prisoners begging or arguing. Chains moved, metal dragged. Hiram lowered himself beside the wall and listened. Transfer them below. Unit loss at outer yard confirmed. Command wants all Libra groups counted. A weaker voice answered, full of fear. Please, we did nothing. Please. A sharp impact cut the voice off. Torres's face hardened. Lena looked at Hiram. Holding group. Yes, Hiram said. He already knew the problem. If they attacked now, they risked noise and delay. If they moved on, those prisoners would be taken deeper, maybe to places they could not reach again. Mission first, civilians second. That was the normal order. But this mission existed because civilians mattered. Hiram made the call. Fast strike, no explosives, no missed shots. The humans nodded before the Kree did. Hiram signaled the count with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They rounded the bend like released blades. Torres hit the nearest guard first, driving him into the wall before the enemy could raise its weapon. Lena dropped to one knee and fired twice, both shots clean and low, cutting down another hostile before it could turn. The Kree scout leaped onto a third in total silence, clawed hands closing over the guard's mouth as a knife slipped between armor plates. Hiram targeted the rear sentry. The shot landed. One enemy remained near the prisoner chain line, dragging a captive in front of itself as a shield. Eli froze for half a second. Then he changed angle instead of firing. He slammed his shoulder into a hanging pipe support. It broke loose and crashed sideways into the guard's head. The captive fell clear. Torres crossed the space in 2 steps and finished the enemy with the butt of his rifle. Done. Quiet again. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the prisoners stared at them through fear and disbelief. There were 12 in the group, different species, thin, bruised, filthy. 2 looked barely able to stand. One older male had blood running from one ear. A child-sized figure clung to the leg of a taller captive and did not let go. Eli knelt at once. You're safe now. The older prisoner looked up with hollow eyes. No one is safe in this place. That answer landed harder than Hiram expected. How many more below? Hiram asked. The prisoner swallowed. Hundreds, maybe more. They keep moving us. Some to work, some... He stopped there. He did not need to finish. Lena moved to the control locks on the chain line and forced them open. Torres handed out water tabs from his own belt without being told. The child-sized captive took one with shaking hands. We can't bring all of them with us, the Kree scout said quietly. No, Hiram replied. The word felt like iron in his throat. He turned to the prisoners. There is a side chamber 20 meters back. Seal it from inside. Stay silent. If Allied troops break through above, signal with these emergency flares. The older prisoner stared at him, then at the humans. You came in here for us? Torres answered before Hiram could. We came in here for everybody. That was a reckless thing to promise. It was also the exact right thing to say. The old prisoner nodded once, as if trying to believe in something he had forgotten how to trust. Then a deep tremor ran through the trench. Dust fell from the ceiling. A second later, the overhead speakers came alive again, and the same cold voice echoed through the corridor. Unauthorized rescue activity detected. Release the hounds. The guards were easy. What the prison sent next was not made to control prisoners. It was made to hunt people like them. The sound came first. Not barking, not growling, not even footsteps. It was the fast metal scratching of many sharp points hitting the trench floor at once, then stopping, then starting again from somewhere closer, like claws, like knives, like something that enjoyed the chase. The prisoners froze. One of them whispered, "No." Hiram turned at once. Back, seal the chamber now. Torres helped the weakest captives move. Lena covered the corridor entrance with her rifle raised. Eli stayed with the old prisoner until the last of them disappeared into the side chamber. The door slid halfway shut, then jammed.
Of course it jams, Lena muttered. Torres shoved it with his shoulder. The metal screamed, then locked into place. A second later, the first hound appeared. It was long and low, built like a hunting beast stretched over a machine frame. Black plates covered its back. Its front limbs were too heavy, ending in hooked claws that sparked against the floor. Its mouth split open far too wide, revealing inner jaws lined with thin metal teeth. Red sensor eyes burned through the steam. Then two more stepped out behind it. Then four. Eli took one breath too fast. Those are not dogs. No, Hiran said. They are pursuit units. The lead hound lowered itself and charged. Hiran fired first. His pulse round hit its shoulder and blasted off armor, but the creature did not fall. It crashed forward anyway, fast as thrown steel. Torres met it with a burst from his rifle, then sidestepped at the last moment. The beast slammed into the wall, sparks and metal fragments spraying from the impact. Head and throat, Hiran shouted. Joint gaps if you can't get either. The trench exploded into motion. Lena dropped one hound with a clean shot through the mouth, but another leaped over its falling body and hit her hard enough to knock her into the wall. Torres caught the thing from the side, driving his combat knife into the neck seam again and again until it finally collapsed with a screeching shudder. The Kree scout vanished into the steam and reappeared on top of another unit, dragging it down in a blur of claws and precision cuts. But there were too many. One slipped past the front line and lunged for Eli. He fired too high, missed, backed up, slipped in the wet trench water and hit the floor hard. The hound launched. Eli threw up his arm on instinct, and the old prisoner, still inside the half-sealed chamber, shoved a broken metal rod through the gap, straight into the beast's face. It turned just enough. Just enough. Eli's second shot went directly into its open throat. The hound collapsed so close, its claws scraped across his boot. He stared at it, shaken, then looked toward the chamber door. The old prisoner stared back through the gap and said, "You came in here for everybody, remember?" Even in the middle of the attack, Torres let out one rough laugh. I like him. Then the scratching sound returned, not from ahead, from above. Hiran looked up. The trench ceiling had maintenance grates set every 10 meters. One bent inward with a sharp metal scream, then another, then another. "They're in the walls," Lena said. "No," Hiran replied, feeling the truth hit before the next wave did. "They're hurting us." The grates burst open. More hounds dropped into the trench behind them, cutting off retreat. At the same moment, a heavy blast door at the far end of the corridor began to rise, revealing a larger chamber beyond, dark, open, and almost certainly worse than the trench. The prison was shaping their path, driving them forward. Torres reloaded and looked at Hiran. "Tell me we're not going in there." Hiran raised his weapon toward the opening. "We are already being pushed." The hounds were never meant to kill them in the trench. They were meant to force the squad into the room ahead, where Varix 9 had prepared something much more dangerous than a hunt.
The squad fell back through the rising blast door just as the next wave of hounds hit the trench. Hiran was the last through. He fired twice into the lead unit, then slammed his hand against the emergency control plate inside the chamber. The heavy door dropped with a brutal crash, cutting off claws, screeches, and sparks in one violent moment. Silence followed. Not true silence, a different kind. This room breathed. That was the first feeling Hiran had. The chamber was wide and circular with a high ceiling crossed by hanging cables and dim red lights. Thick glass columns stood around the edges, each filled with pale liquid. Inside some of them floated shapes, small, twisted, unfinished things with metal fused into flesh. On the far wall, tall screens flickered with scrolling symbols and casualty numbers from the battle above. At the center of the room stood a ring-shaped platform surrounded by control arms. A testing lab. No, a fear lab. Eli looked around slowly. What is this place? The answer came from the speakers before Hiran could give one. This is where defiance is measured. The cold voice returned, calm and proud now. Species from weaker worlds are brought here before reassignment. Some are broken for labor. Some are reshaped for service. Some teach us how long hope survives under pressure. Lena's face turned hard. I'm going to kill whoever owns that voice. Torres glanced at one of the glass columns. Get in line. Then the lights changed. White beams snapped on overhead. Thin lines of energy rose around the central platform, forming a cage of light. The doors behind them locked with a deep mechanical thud. On the far side of the chamber, another door opened, and 3 figures stepped in. They looked like prisoners at first. Then Hiran saw the way they moved. Too smooth, too exact. Each wore torn worker clothing over metal support frames fixed into their arms, neck, and chest. Their eyes were empty, their mouths hung open. Shock collars burned blue at their throats. They carried industrial cutters changed into weapons. Control thralls, Hiran said quietly. Eli's voice dropped. They're prisoners? They were. The 3 rushed at once. Torres met the first with the stock of his rifle, knocking the cutter aside, but he did not shoot. Lena avoided a swing from the second and struck its wrist instead, trying to disarm, not kill. Even the Kree scout hesitated. That hesitation nearly cost them. The third thrall charged straight at Eli. He backed up, weapon raised, but his hands locked. The face rushing toward him was not blank anymore. It was terrified, alive enough to know what was happening. Help me, the thrall gasped. Then the collar flashed. Its body jerked violently and attacked even harder. Eli froze. Hiran fired a precise shot into the collar, not the head. The device exploded. The thrall dropped instantly, convulsed once, then lay still, alive, breathing, free. Collars, Hiran shouted. Target collars only. Everything changed. Now the fight became harder and far more dangerous. Small targets, moving bodies, no room for mistakes. Torres ducked, shifted, and shot one collar off at near point-blank range. Lena slid under a wild blade swing and cut a support cable, using it to pull another thrall off balance before firing into the throat device. The Kree scout disabled the last one with a slash so fast Hiran barely saw it. All 3 captives fell, alive. For one sharp moment, the room seemed to pause and study them. Then the voice returned, colder than before. Interesting. The humans hesitate to kill the controlled. They preserve strangers under combat stress. Emotional burden confirmed. Torres looked up slowly. That wasn't analysis. Hiran felt it too. This room was not just watching them, it was learning them. And on the central screen, new numbers began to appear, updated live from the battlefield above. One column was marked Allied Losses. The other, far smaller one, had only 4 words. Human casualties, still rising interest. The prison had stopped trying to crush them. Now it was studying the humans, and whatever it learned in this room could change the entire war above.
Haran stepped closer to the central screen, eyes locked on the changing numbers. They were not random battlefield updates. They were sorted, measured, compared. Enemy losses by sector, allied losses by species, stress spikes, combat duration, rescue deviation, response to civilian exposure. It was a living study of pain, fear, and behavior in war. And the humans were no longer a footnote in it. They were becoming the focus. This whole place is an evaluation chamber, Haran said. Not only for prisoners, for anyone who enters. Lena kept her rifle trained on the doors. Then it picked the wrong squad. I'm not sure it did, Eli replied quietly. He was staring at the rescued thrall nearest him, the one whose collar Haran had destroyed. The former prisoner was conscious now, barely. His breathing came in short, rough pulls. Metal braces had been bolted into both arms. There were old restraint wounds on his wrists. He looked at Eli and whispered, "They send the data upward." Haran turned at once. "To where?" The captive swallowed. "Command tower, inner control core. Everything collected here goes there. Fear response, casualty response, species resistance, all of it." Torres's face hardened. "So while we've been fighting, they've been learning who breaks first. And who doesn't," Haran said. That was the real danger. Varix 9 had not built this system only to torture prisoners. It was building battle doctrine, testing species, searching for weak points it could use later. And now, humans were giving it something new to study. A species that rushed toward fire for teammates. A species that risked mission success for civilians. A species that carried fear openly and kept moving anyway. To Haran, those traits were becoming strengths. To the enemy, they could become targets. The screens shifted again. This time, the chamber showed live interior routes through the prison complex. Corridors lit up in red and white. A path flashed from their current chamber to the central control block above. Then another message appeared. "Behavioral deviation detected. Escalate trial." "No," Haran said softly. The floor moved. Not much, just a small vibration at first. Then sections of the ring platform opened, and thin projectors rose from inside it. White light spread through the room in overlapping grids. Around them, the air thickened with sound, whispers, screams, static, crying, command voices, all layered together until the chamber itself felt like a mind breaking apart. Psychic pressure simulation, artificial but powerful. Haran felt a sharp stab behind his eyes. The Kree scout dropped to one knee at once, hissing in pain. Lena flinched hard and pressed a hand against the side of her helmet. Torres's jaw locked. Eli staggered backward, blinking fast, as if trying to clear water from his sight. The room was probing them through stress overload, testing what pushed them apart. Then the illusions began. For Haran, the walls seemed to bend inward. He heard old battlefield voices from soldiers he had once failed. He saw shapes in the corners that were not there. For a moment, his breathing lost rhythm. But through the noise, he heard Torres shouting, not in fear, in command. "Stay with what's real. Lena, left wall, blue pipe. Eli, count with me." Eli answered, voice shaking. 1, 2, 3. Lena forced herself upright. "Still here." Torres moved toward the center projector grid under all that pressure, like a man dragging himself through deep water. Haran understood the plan half a second later. "Break the emitters," Haran ordered. The squad opened fire. Shots shattered the nearest projector, then another, then another. Each one reduced the noise, the pressure, the twisting false images. The room fought to hold them under. The humans fought harder. At last, the final emitter burst, and the chamber dropped back into brutal, blessed clarity. Smoke drifted from the ruined platform. The screen flickered once more. Then, for the first time, the prison voice sounded uncertain. "Impossible adaptation." Torres wiped blood from one ear and looked up at the speakers. "No," he said, "you just don't understand people yet." The chamber had tested fear, pain, and pressure, and the humans had pushed through all three. So the prison stopped observing and finally decided to send something personal.
The answer came through the far door. Slow steps, heavy steps, not rushed, not angry, confident. The door split open, and a single figure entered the chamber. At first glance, it looked like one of Varix 9's ruling officers, tall, narrow, wrapped in layered black armor with silver command markings along the chest. But the more Huron looked, the less natural the figure seemed. Its movements were too exact,
Its posture was too perfect. Half its face was hidden behind a smooth metal plate, and one eye glowed with a cold inner light. This was no ordinary commander. It was the mind behind the prison's tests. "I am Overseer Kale," the figure said. Its voice matched the speaker's, but stronger now, more personal. "Behavioral architect of this facility." Torres raised his rifle. "Great, we finally found the talker." Kale ignored him and looked instead at the humans. "You were dismissed by your own allies before arrival, marked as emotionally unstable, physically average, predictably fragile." Eli's mouth tightened. Kale continued, calm as ice. "Yet you repeatedly return for the wounded, divert for prisoners, resist engineered panic, accept fear without surrendering to it." Its glowing eyes sharpened. "You are inefficient by design, and still difficult to break." Lena stepped forward despite her injured shoulder. "Are you going somewhere with this?" "Yes," Kale said. "I wish to test the cost." The walls changed again, not with sound this time, with images. On the main screen appeared the lower holding sectors, real ones, not simulations, rows of prisoners packed behind sealed barriers, families, workers, children, frightened faces pressed against reinforced glass. Then a second image appeared beside it, the control core above, the anti-air network, the only path that could open the sky for Allied reinforcements. Kale spread one hand toward both screens. "One route leads upward. Complete your mission, and the Council fleet gains this prison world. The other route leads downward. Rescue those civilians, and you lose the time required to reach the tower before my defenses reset." The chamber went still. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "A classic pressure split," Hiran said quietly. "Yes," Kale replied. "Your kind calls it choice. I call it measurement." Torres stared at the screens. "You're trying to force us to pick who matters more." "I am revealing what already governs you. Mission or mercy, efficiency or attachment, victory or conscience." Eli looked sick. Lena looked furious. The Kree scout said nothing, but Hiran could feel the tension in the room turning sharp, because Kale had found the real weakness. Not fear, not pain, care. Humans cared so quickly and so deeply that enemies could build traps from it. For one dangerous second, Hiran saw the split forming in the squad before a single word was spoken. Then Torres exhaled slowly and looked at the others. "No," he said. "No?" Kale tilted its head. "No? You keep thinking those are opposite choices. That's your mistake." Kale's glowing eye narrowed. "Explain." Lena gave a tight smile. "Gladly." Hiran understood it at the moment she did. The prison had studied human emotion, but it still did not understand human stubbornness, or creativity under pressure, or what happened when people refused the shape of the test itself. Torres turned to Hiran. "Captain, tell me the control core feeds through the lower systems." Hiran looked once at the route map on the screen. Then he saw it. A narrow service spine, emergency power trunk, one line touching both sectors. His pulse quickened. "It does," he said. Kale's expression changed for the first time. Not fear, but concern. Kale had designed the perfect choice: save the prisoners or save the mission. But in the next few moments, the humans were about to show him the one thing his calculations had never allowed for: people who refused to choose only one. Hiran moved first. "Service spine," he said, pointing to the route flashing across Kale's own screen. "It links the lower holding sectors to the control core. Emergency power, locks, lift access, and internal defense routing all pass through it." Torres smiled. So if we hit the spine, we hit both, Lena finished. Kale stepped back half a pace. You do not have enough time. No, Hiran said, raising his weapon. You simply wasted too much of it talking. Kale moved with sudden speed. A blade snapped from its forearm, and it lunged across the chamber, straight for Eli, the youngest, the least steady, the one it still believed would break first. But Eli did not freeze this time. He dropped low, rolled aside, and shouted, "Now!" Torres fired at Kale's damaged eye. Lena shot at the knee joints. Hiran aimed for the center chest plate, where command processors were most likely buried. Kale twisted away from 2 shots, blocked one with its armored arm, and still kept coming. Fast. Too fast. It slashed toward Eli again, but Torres crashed into it from the side with full force. Both of them slammed into the central console ring. Sparks burst upward. Lena used the opening to fire into the exposed leg joint. Kale staggered. Hiran crossed the distance and struck hard with the butt of his rifle, driving the overseer back another step. "Mercer!" Hiran shouted. Eli already understood. He ran to the main control bank, hands shaking but working. He pulled free the prisoner access grid, found the emergency branch lines, and slammed the service spine override wide open. Across the screen, red sectors turned white. Holding cell locks released. Interior defense routes glitched. Lift paths to the control core unlocked. "All lower sectors are open," Eli shouted, "and the tower route is live." Kale let out a harsh, broken sound and threw Torres off with mechanical force. "You will lose control of the prison." "That's the idea," Lena said. Kale turned toward the console. Hiran fired 3 times into its chest. The armor cracked. Torres rose, blood on his face, and drove his knife deep into the same split. Lena's final shot hit the glowing eye. Kale jerked once, then collapsed against the command platform, sparks pouring from its ruined head and chest. The lights flickered. Then every speaker in the prison filled with one clear signal: anti-air network offline. For half a second, nobody moved. Then the world above answered. From somewhere beyond the walls came the deep roar of Allied drop engines descending at last. Second wave, reinforcements. The sky was open. Hiran looked at the screens. Prisoner doors were opening sector by sector. Guards were losing control. Allied troops were breaking through the outer yard and flooding inward. What had begun as one desperate assault was now becoming a collapse. Torres sat down hard and laughed once from pure exhaustion. Lena leaned against the wall, breathing through pain but still standing. Eli stared at the open sectors on the screen like he could barely believe they were real. "You did it," he said quietly. Hiran looked at the 3 humans, at their fear, at their damage, at the lives they had saved while still finishing the mission, and at last he understood what the Council had failed to see. Humans were never dangerous because they lacked fear. They were dangerous because fear did not stop them from caring. And once they chose to care, they became impossible to dismiss. Later, when the casualty reports reached the Council, the tone of the galaxy changed. Not because humans had asked for respect, but because they had earned it where it mattered most, at the gates of hell and inside it. Varex 9 was liberated. The prisoners were not forgotten, and from that day on, no one in the galaxy ever called humans ordinary again. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.